Welcome to another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Stringer. And as always, the podcast brought to you by your friends at the Maryland Photography Alliance. I always encourage people to check out their website, which is mdphotoalliance.org, where you can see upcoming events and contests and information. A number of the camera clubs that participate with the Alliance have events, and it's really always a great destination to go to learn more, to share what you know, and to meet like-minded people who like to get out there and do a lot of photography. I know that our listeners range everywhere from amateurs and enthusiasts all the way up to working professionals like this episode's guest, and just a great place to go and get good information. So I encourage everybody to do that. So this episode, I would like to welcome to the podcast Kyle Terada, who is a phenomenal photographer focusing on sports primarily, but we're going to get into a lot of the other things that he does. He's based in the San Francisco area. He's not only a photographer, he's a photo editor, international man of mystery. He has shot the Olympics, Super Bowls, World Series, British Open. There's just so much that he's done, and look forward to digging into it with him. So Kyle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
You know, a lot of times people talk about photography and especially sports photography, and they say, how'd you get into that? So that's probably a good place to start. So how'd you get into it?
Well, it's a long story, but as a kid, I loved sports. I loved playing sports. Played basketball, a little bit of baseball. But when I was born with bad knees from my parents, and medically I couldn't play competitive sports into middle school. And my mom would always take a camera with her to all these sporting events that we would go to, San Jose Sharks games, San Francisco Giants, and I would just steal the camera from her, and I would have fun with it, and waste a lot of money because it was film back then. So that, and I just grew a fond of it. And we had a family friend who was an Associated Press staff photographer and helped mentor me through middle school and high school. And I got to tag along with him to cover those major events, Stanford football, San Jose Sharks. And then I got to meet the Stanford team photographer and he, after I during my senior year in high school, I started photographing for him, covering events. And then he hired me full time after I graduated high school. And so I didn't go to college, but I worked for a college. And so it was a lot of fun covering all the major sporting events that they had, 35 varsity sports. And so that's how it all started, was just photographing. I did a lot through high school and middle school for the yearbooks and the team photography. One of the well-known alums at Palo Alto High, I went to Palo Alto High School, and one of the well-known alums is Jeremy Lin. So I got to photograph him a lot, behind the scenes, locker room and whatnot. So it was a lot of fun. And then, yeah, from 2004 till 2009, I was with Stanford Athletics, covering their events. And then there was a budget cut. And so then US Press Wire at the time, in 2006, reached out to my boss and said, can you photograph events for us? And my boss was too busy with Stanford and said, well, I have a photographer that can help you out. And so gave my name as a recommendation, and I started shooting contract work for them since 2006. And then when I left Stanford, US Press Wire hired me full time in 2009. And so I've been full time with them since 2009, shooting for US Press Wire. Then it became USA Today Sports, and now Imagine Images.
So would you say that, you know, during that time you learned certainly on the job, but then did you have a mentor or mentors that kind of helped you with the finer points along the way?
Yeah, I did. There was the Associated Press staff photographer in San Francisco Bay Area. His name was Paul Sakuma. He was a family friend, and he let me tag along with him. And I learned a lot hands-on versus in the classroom, because always the classroom was subjects that I didn't really care about. I was all interested in sports. And so being hands on with him and learning through him was incredible. Then the director of photography for Stanford Athletics was David Gonzalez, and he helped me a lot too as well. I owe a lot to them, and there's a lot of professionals in the area that I owe a lot to. Nat V. Meyer from San Jose Mercury News. He, I gave him a lot of newspaper tear sheets of my high school newspaper, and I sent him a full packet, and he responded nicely, and we're best friends now. So it's just incredible how many people helped me out through my career. I owe a lot to them.
I suppose that almost any major city could have this, but I have a real awareness of the depth of really incredible photographers that are in the Bay Area. And I think of, people like Michael Zagaris and Brad Mangin and Gene Fruth, and there's, many, many others. And, people who've been doing it a long time, like Theron Henderson. And just do you think that, you having traveled all over the US and all over the world, do you think that San Francisco has a deeper bench, so to speak, of these really talented long-term photographers, or more so than maybe other places? Or what do you attribute to that kind of talent in a relatively confined area?
Yeah, it is tough working here because there are so many great photographers here. Ezra Shaw from Getty.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of them that are incredible. So it motivates me a lot to photograph all these events and try to think outside the box and be creative, and try to compete with them. I This area is heavily populated with a lot of great photographers. I don't know a lot of the other areas in all their photographers, so I can't compare it to it. But yeah, it's always motivating for me to try to do something new in the Bay Area so that I can compete with all of them here.
Well, it's such a kind of artistic area, in the sense that, you've got phenomenal culture just in general. You've got a really incredible music scene that, of course, dates back to the 50s and the 60s. The good example is, I mentioned before, Michael Zagaris, and he's photographing in the Haight-Ashbury area, back with Jefferson Airplane and Clapton and, all that kind of stuff, all the way through, present day. But you also have, whether it's college or pro, you have this very long lineage of professional and college sports with all of these schools and all these teams. And, it's the more there is to shoot, you need photographers. So I guess, there's more opportunity. So theoretically, there's more people who can get a foot in the door and learn and grow. And maybe that's part of the answer why there's so many. I mean, do you think that your area there is, as rich now in photographic subject matter as ever before, or has that changed during your years shooting professionally?
I think it's changed. I think it's gotten a lot better. I mean, we have a lot of big name athletes now, with the San Francisco 49ers doing well. Just recently, Golden State Warriors were doing very well for, 5 to 6 years. And yeah, it's just Sacramento Kings are getting better. The San Jose Sharks are great, So yeah, there are a lot of teams that here to cover, professional or college. And so yeah, I do have, I'm in charge of Northern California coverage for Imagine, and so I have 15 plus photographers on my staff to cover all these big events that we have in the Bay Area. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity here to cover.
Yeah, I mean, I know in my case, in my area in Maryland, I was shooting with US Press Wire, shooting with USA Today. So, I've sort of followed a somewhat similar, at least last decade kind of, time frame as as what you described. So I can definitely appreciate that. One thing that you mentioned was interesting to me, that you talked about learning on the job and getting pointers and advice. And a lot of times amateur photographers will approach me and they'll say, how can I take better pictures? And there's always that saying about, how do you take more interesting pictures? And it's take pictures of more interesting people or things. But from a technical standpoint, when you are just getting started as a photographer, sometimes someone who's more experienced can give you one or two pointers, and your photography moves forward by leaps and bounds early on. There's some basic things that if you don't knowing them and implementing them, it's like night and day. Night and day. I mean, something as simple as clean up your backgrounds. That's sort of, but that's one of those things where people would say, huh, what do you mean? And then you look at their picture and you point out that so-and-so has a pole sticking out of their head. Somebody has something else, as I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but, what are those kind of things maybe when you look at people's work, whether it's a professional or an amateur, what are some of those things that you look at and say, here's the first couple of things you want to pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, with sports photography, you want the action to pop out in the image. And so backgrounds are very important. I learned that very early on through David Gonzalez at Stanford. Backgrounds are very important. Not only cleaning them up, but also at moments showcasing the background of logos and whatnot when they're at big, like the NCAA Final Four or whatnot. So backgrounds are very crucial. Thinking about anticipating the play and cleaning up the background, going to a different angle spot to clean, or go up or low in that situation. You just want the action to pop out at you versus getting distracted by something in the background, whether it is a pole or a fan wearing a bright color. Objects like that are very distracting to the photo. So with my cameras now, I shoot Sony's, and I love being able to utilize the tilt screen and the flip of the screen to come up. And so I can shoot a lot more low angle stuff. And that kind of cleans up the background and makes them more athletic looking when they jump higher in the background. Background is one very important thing that I try to look at most times.
Yeah, about 6 years ago, I made the switch from Canon over to Sony for my sports and wildlife photography. And for me, it was a significant upgrade. And when I say upgrade, I mean, Canon has a great system, and a lot of the brands have great systems. But at that time, especially, the autofocus capabilities really allowed me to identify what I wanted to focus on and feel pretty comfortable that it was going to lock focus. And then I was really following the action. I was paying more attention to my composition and not as much trying to stay focused, because I kind of knew that was going to be the case. Now, of course, they've got bird focus, animal focus, senior citizen focus, whatever you wanted to focus on, there's a menu item. But yeah, I moved to that system as well. I think that one of the things that I've seen with people who ask me is that, sometimes they feel like the subject is real, that they first see is really the only subject in that view. And they're not necessarily looking to get lower or to, in some cases, go higher up and shoot down, if depending upon the sport, depending upon the situation. And I think that, that's another one of those kind of watershed moments when you explain it, and then you almost give the person permission to view the world differently, or at least in addition to what they're used to. That's, you can convey the height of someone, as you said, whether it's literal height, how tall they are, or how high they're jumping, or how massive they may be of a human being, or small, depends on, whatever it is. And, that kind of leads me to a thought. You've shot, among the many different things, the Olympics. And the Olympics is not necessarily like a lot of the events we shoot, where we have the flexibility to move, to get closer, get left, get right, et cetera. Maybe you can kind of talk about the shooting environment at an Olympic versus, let's say, at an NFL game on the sidelines.
Yeah, the Olympics is difficult to photograph because they are designated spots and they're not necessarily close to the action. You know, I feel like the Olympics is more for TV than it is for photographers. And there are a handful, the major agencies do get access to different spots. And so with me, I don't get that access, and I'm with all the other photographers and trying to I go to the arenas early while they're doing their warm ups and their training sessions, just to look at the different angles, check out all the photo spots, and go to them and try to figure out what I could do with those angles for each apparatus, because I did gymnastics in Paris, or for basketball, which spots. But typically for basketball, they assign us to our spots. So it's where we have to shoot the entire game. So it's a little bit difficult for shooting positions versus where we're at NFL, where we can go anywhere around the field if we have field access. But I like the challenges because it's once you get a photo that you think of, you pre-plan, and it works out. It's incredible feeling.
So we all have those stories where we anticipated a moment, we put ourselves in the right spot, that moment happens, and we make the photo that we had pre-visualized. There's also the moments where we do all those things right and something happens and we miss it. And I know that you've probably only missed one or two in your entire career. I will admit I've missed more than that. So can you share with us, has there been one where you think, oh man, that was the one that got away?
Ooh.
See, look, I knew it was near impossible for you to think of any
No,
photo.
no. I've had many moments. It's tough to think about which one. Trying to think off the top of the head.
Here, so I'll start you off. So I had a moment where it was in Baltimore, and Houston Texans were playing, and I knew that on the goal line, the Texans had a running back named Arian Foster, and Arian Foster was a phenomenal running back. And what he would do is he would leap over the defensive line. He would just leap over on the goal line, and I thought that's what he's going to do. So I was laying on my stomach on the back of the end zone, the back line, and I am waiting and waiting and waiting, and they call timeout on defense, and I am waiting, and now the play is about to happen, and it is hot. It is crazy hot. So the ball gets handed off. I can't see what's going on. I'm assuming that they've handed it to Arian Foster. I see him starting to go up in the air, the top of his helmet, and I'm just wanting to get him so at least his waist and above is kind of facing me before it begins that arc forward. Just at that exact second, a big ball of sweat drops into my eye and I blink. I can't see anything. So I just start shooting. Well, safe to say, I missed the shot. I got the shot of him vertical up and down into the end zone, but it was his back because he was diving into the end zone. I wanted the shot of him, facing me, almost going over. So that was what I call an almost. But the damn thing happened because this giant bead of sweat, because I'd been so focused in like 80 something degree temperatures. So that's an example for me of like one that got away where I was in the right place. I kind of knew the play and I botched it. we can come back to it.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, we can come back to it because you might have a moment where you go, oh, you know what? This is the one that happened. So from a perspective of gear, we all look at what the event is and we all choose our lens, selection based on what that particular event is. So, if you're going to go out and shoot, let's say, baseball as compared to golf, for listeners, most listeners would say, well, I would take my zoom, because many listeners may have a 75 to 300 or, something like that. So for people who are wondering how you select your lenses, Many people who have, let's say, a 75 to 300 zoom, they'll bring that and you cover a lot of focal range. As a professional, you're going to have a much broader assortment of lenses. So maybe you could kind of share with people, if you're going to be shooting a golf tournament versus a football game versus maybe a baseball game, what are your go-to lenses that you're bringing no matter what? And then what are the lenses that are really more specific to the actual sport and maybe your distance to the subjects? How do you kind of make those choices?
I have quite a few lenses, and it after a while I've gotten used to using what type of lenses per event, but sometimes I will mix it up just to give me a different option for creativity or whatnot. But for golf, I Sony has two great lenses that give you a wide zoom, which is a 24 to 240 and a 200 to 600. So that gives me a very big range. And I love them because with golf, you can clean up the backgrounds with the 200 600, and you can shoot with the 24 to 240 to do wide angle shots or go in tight, and still be able to get in close to the action. Those are my two favorite lenses for golf. Then there is for basketball, I'm the 24-1.4 is my wide angle just to have, and the 7200 is my prime lens that I use, plus a 300 for the far court. For football, I use a 400-2.8 with a teleconverter at times, and then a 7200 and the 24-1.4. Those are those two 24-1.4 and 7200 are my favorite lenses, just because they give me a lot of low angle impact type of shots. I like to utilize low angle, so I use a little tripod head on a floor plate to with the 400, and I feel like it does give me that angle of looking up at the action and clean up the backgrounds at times and make them look more athletic. And then with the 7200, I will always put it on the ground with the tilt screen up and photograph that way with that. It hurts my back, but I feel like I get a lot of great images through that.
Yeah, it's always fun when you're on the NFL sideline and the field position changes dramatically, and you have to jump up and run the sidelines with, three cameras and lenses, and things are swinging, and you're racing however many other photographers and the television camera operator with, with the not the truck, but the vehicle that moves it. You've got to dodge that. I don't think that most people realize kind of almost like the jockeying for position. It's kind of crazy.
Yes. And just to go back to that previous question about missing a moment, there was that moment where I did have my 7200 on the ground and in the end zone. And there, when you have the camera on the ground, you don't think that you're fighting with a lot of things, but I didn't realize I was fighting with the TV cables. And as the moment was coming, the cable guy pulled his cable up and hit my lens and flipped it up. So I missed the moment there. So that is, yeah, I'm trying to utilize that low angle, but I did miss it because of the cable being pulled and hitting my 7200.
I've had those moments where I'm in the corner of the end zone because I'm thinking that the team may run a sweep. And so I want to be right there on the, I guess the pylon or whatever, and get that classic shot of the guy diving with the ball. And I mean, literally, there's 6 seconds until the snap, and then next thing I know, I see the vest of the back of the TV camera guy, because he doesn't care, and he has just plopped down right in front of me.
Yes.
It's all I can do not to gently push him forward. Yeah, but then I know that I would get that not so nice phone call from the editor saying, "So we just got a call from the league."
Exactly.
So you pick your spot, and then where I've seen it almost get violent is after the game when the handshakes happen. Yes. And it is a free for all. And people will, I mean, you could be a foot and a half away from the two quarterbacks when they shake hands, and some photographer is going to literally, I mean, you're giving these athletes a foot and a half, which is not a lot of room, but you're giving them at least a little personal space to be able to get a wide angle picture. And somebody sees that respect for the athlete as opportunity for them to slide in the middle.
Yes.
And that person I don't have to worry about as much because they're not TV. But maybe talk about what those scrums can almost be like out there, because the public doesn't see those situations. They see a bunch of photographers, but they don't really know that there's some sharp elbows sometimes that get thrown in those situations.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I do sharpen my elbows once it comes down to a minute left in the game, just to run out there, because you are fighting with a lot of photographers and videographers, and also their helpers to get into that scrum. Yeah, I have a strategy on, if I get there first, I try to get low and try to help out with other photographers. And but if I don't get there, I'm trying to shoot over them with the tilt screen, utilizing that. But yeah, it is tough, and I just try to keep my ground, and I look around, making sure that no one will either bump me as much as possible, or if I need to move to a different spot that I know that I won't get bumped as much. But yeah, those are very difficult situations. Even watching after the Super Bowl this time, I was watching it on TV, and yeah, those moments are very stressful to get.
Well, what's helped though, and you said it, are the tilt screens. It used to be when I had the Canon 1DX, you would have a wide angle, maybe it was a 1635 or whatever, and you would reasonably tilt the camera as you thought. But there wasn't a whole lot of time to tilt, shoot, and then check it. It was like shoot, 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 shoot with a wide angle. Nowadays, you can be spot on with a tilt angle, and you know exactly what you're shooting at. So that has simplified it a great deal, I think.
Yes, yeah, I feel like with the Sony camera, I mean, I started with the Sony cameras in 2017 when they announced that they were having their Sony A9, the first camera, and
Mm-hmm.
that was competitive with sports photography DSLRs. And they were at the 2017 PGA Championship, their first pro support event that they were at, and I was just testing out their cameras, and I knew immediately that the tilt would help a lot with any low angles or elevated angles, because I definitely knew that once I could see it better on the screen, that I am capturing that action. I'm making sure that it's sharp and I'm composing it, whereas it's just a Hail Mary, throwing up your hand in the air and not sure if you actually got that moment. So I feel like I am getting a lot more moments now, and my photography is improving because I'm utilizing that tilt screen.
Just sort of shifting gears a little bit, when you are not in your photographer role, when you're in a photo editor role, you're working with people who are paid to shoot events, they're professionals, but everybody can learn. And so when you're looking at all these images, and in some cases you have multiple photographers for a single event, what's some of the advice that you find yourself giving even professional photographers who are out there covering an event?
The play isn't over once the play stops. You want to photograph the extra, celebration or the dejection, the storytelling photos in sports. Cleaning up the backgrounds is a lot for what I don't see at times here and there. But for the most part, all of our photographers know how to cover events. It's more telling them, look out for Taylor Swift at the event, or as a photo editor, is what I'm telling them, just to make sure that they capture.
I use the expression when people ask, I say, shoot through the play. Don't shoot just the play, shoot through it, because as you said, you get the post play moment. An easy example would be the golfer misses a putt. Don't just shoot, the putt, shoot after, whether he or she makes it or misses it, shoot through it. You get the caddy reaction, the interaction between the golfer and the caddy, because sometimes, I mean, unless it's a putt that's going to be, to win an event, a putt, a 3-footer can be fairly mundane for a professional golfer. But if that golfer misses that 3-foot putt, therefore maybe it's a bogey instead of a par, that can make a big difference. And that reaction on an otherwise mundane play, the golfer can wince because he's real unhappy that he gave away a stroke. So it's that exact thing is, when you think it's over, it may not be over.
And some of
You
those
know,
are the
what,
best images from the game, is the reactions.
one of the things that, and I know this, but a lot of times, you see photographers and myself as well. You could have a game that is a really slow game, but there's a lot going on that could be not on the playing field. It could be on the bench, or it could be small moments between a coach and a player. Conversely, you could have a game that's 17-10 at halftime, but you'd say, I didn't get a single shot this half. We don't mean we didn't make a single picture, but we didn't make a single picture where we thought, that's nice. That's really something. So, maybe talk about, how hard we can all be on ourselves, because I think there's a lot of photographers out there who feel like if they're not happy with what they shoot, that they're in a vacuum, that it's just them, and that, professionals, they're professionals, they're getting great images every time they go out. But maybe talk about that voice within that we all have.
Yeah, I mean, sports photography is tough because there are a lot of those dead moments where nothing happens and you just don't feel like you've got anything. I mean, there's many games that I've done where I felt like I didn't get anything out of it.
It's definitely a challenge when, you want to definitely make a picture, and you just feel like you missed the angle, or you got the back of the person and you just didn't nail it. So that definitely shines through for me. I know that. So you've been a photographer for quite a long time. And then in June of 2022, you get married.
Yes.
And now your wife Melissa is not only, before dating, but now married to a photographer. That is not always an easy thing to do, because
Yes.
you are on the go, and your schedule is not a normal schedule. So just in general, how is that sort of indoctrinating her to the life of a sports photographer?
Well, I am very lucky because she's a big sports fan. And so that's what really enticed her to want to meet me. We met through a dating app. And we both talked about this, that if I had met her before the pandemic, so I actually met her during the pandemic. And so
Okay.
if I had met her before the pandemic, I was traveling so much and she wouldn't have not like that at all. But we got to get to know each other through the pandemic. And then she started seeing afterwards that I was traveling a lot. And so that made it a little bit more difficult. But she's very understanding. We talked through it, but her love for sports has really helped make me be able to go to cover these events. And I've brought her to the NBA finals. She was able to help me out there. And so, yeah, just I owe a lot to her for being so supportive for my photography and sports.
Yeah, it's a lot of long days. People think that if an NBA game starts at 7 o'clock and it's over at 10 o'clock, people say, "Oh, the game starts at 7. So what do you get there around 6:30?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she had a tough time learning that I set up remote cameras at basketball NBA games, and I have to get there before the players get onto the court. So I'm usually there at 2 o'clock for a 7 p.m. game. So yeah, she's very understanding. And now with having my firstborn, he's 7 months old, and it's just having to deal with her handling him while I'm gone. So I have a lot of respect for her. But yeah, it is a long day. I mean, even after the game, I'm there a few hours, 3 hours, because I have to tear down and edit all the images that I did in the second half, and go through all the remote photos, because I wasn't able to get those cards during the game. So yeah, it's a lot of time spent at these sporting events that no one typically knows about.
So if you're shooting an average NBA game, what would you say the total number of photos are that you take from all the sources, whether it's the cameras you're personally holding, or the remotes? So what would you guess would be a total? And then from that, what would you say the number is that you push out through Imagine to the various outlets that subscribe or use Imagine for photos, just so people can understand? I take this many, but this many actually kind of makes it out of my computer.
This is going to make me look bad because I have a very heavy lead finger and I just motor drive away. And I also do like to photograph a lot of the ancillary coverage of, doing stock imagery of the referees, the celebrities at the games or the assistant coaches, just trying to get everyone because you never know what a story is going to come out later on. And so with my handhelds, I usually have three cameras with me, and then I'll do a glass remote or overhead remote. And I would say for a typical normal NBA game, probably 8,000 to 10,000 photos is taken,
Mm-hmm.
especially with these Sony cameras that shoot 30 frames a second. It's, those numbers do get up there for me.
Mm-hmm.
But with keeping for deadline, it's probably around 50 images is what I'll send out. And then I'll go later on to go through all the images and being able to do the isolation shots of them dribbling the ball or them just standing around for headshots and stuff like that. I'll add probably around 150 to 200 photos extra. So that percentage is a lot lower than what I actually shoot.
Well, but as you said, when you're working with professional cameras and they're shooting 30 frames per second, you're choosing the best of the best where, one picture the guy's eyes are closed, the next picture one eye is closed, the next picture one eye is half closed, and you're using the one where both eyes are open, just as an example. So
Yeah.
you're kind of picking the best of the best, which makes perfect sense. But as you're doing that, what that really speaks to is the amount of time that it
Yes.
takes to cull through these images, to not only give them like just basic editing, maybe a crop, et cetera, because as editorial photographers, we can't change the image. We're just tweaking ever so slightly. But that takes time, and we're
Yes.
not using AI. We're using our own eye, not AI. Uh,
Exactly.
and I always joke that a lot of times the pictures that I take in warm-ups of the guy who maybe he'll only play 6 games in his life professionally, that's the guy who, 10 years later robs a bank, or the guy who unfortunately, passes away in a car accident, or, the guy that goes on to be a congressman, but it's, you just never know where the
Mm-hmm.
life of these images is going to go. And, I think, some of the pictures that I thought were the best ones that I had ever taken, unfortunately, they didn't see the light of day because of whatever situation, you know, magazines went with a different angle of that same shot or something. What would you say is the photo or couple of photos you've made over the years that got the broadest mass exposure of any of the pictures that you've ever taken? Do you have a feeling for that or not really?
Um, there's one image that comes to mind that there was at a San Francisco Giants game. It was a remote camera. I left in the third base photo well, and I was on the first base side, and it was a play at home, and it was in a reaction shot, not the actual game action. And so shooting through the action is another moment right here. So the runner got tagged out and he was all face down up, or sorry, face up, and the catcher and the umpire is over the runner, and the umpire is doing the out signal, but it looks like he's going to punch him, the athlete that's laying on the ground. And so that got used quite a bit in Double Truck for Sports Illustrated, a 2-page spread. And then I think there was the SI Photo of the Year magazine too as well, and that was in there as well. So that was probably one of my images that got used a lot.
That's a great moment though, where you think something's happening and it's not, because he wasn't going to punch him. It just looked that way.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I didn't know that from my angle and first base side. I didn't see it, but I just kept on motor driving, and it was a happy moment to capture that.
Years ago, I was in Maryland photographing. It was Tiger Woods when he was kind of the face of the AT&T National, And after the final round, I happened to be walking back to the media area, and I photographed Tiger Woods with his then wife and kids. And I just thought, oh, this is a nice moment. And, I got some, nice pictures of them, et cetera. And then, of course, we kind of all know what unfortunately happened with he and his wife. And next thing you know, I get a phone call from a friend of mine who said, you know that picture that you did of Tiger and his family? I said, oh, yeah, yeah. He said, well, I'm checking out of the grocery store. It's in People magazine, it's on the cover of Star magazine. And long story short, those series of pictures played all over the world. They were on the front of covers. I mean, every checkout line. And it was so weird because it was, I mean, we all know why it became so well used, but it wasn't a sports picture. It was really a family picture, which was just so bizarre that the most used picture was sort of it was ancillary to the sporting event,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of an odd way that it came, because I guess what I found out later is there were very few pictures of Tiger, his wife, and the kids, and
Yes.
that was why it got used so broadly. But yeah, just kind of a weird moment. So let me ask you, we've got so much in the way of online usage of images today. And you, like myself, we know lots and lots and lots of sports photographers all over the US and maybe even the world. And what's interesting is if you think of the law of supply and demand, I could make the case that there's more demand for imagery now than probably ever. And yet the perceived value, and maybe the frankly the paid value, the remuneration for that supply on a per image basis is probably never been lower than it is now. So it seems like an inverse relationship. So, just from a business perspective, why do you think it would be that at a time when there's never been more demand and there's the same supply generally as there always has, because there's always been people shooting the games, why do you think that exists in current times? Any thoughts at all on that?
I just think it's with technology getting better, the cell phones are getting better. The cameras are getting cheaper too as well on some models, and so a lot of spectators are bringing in cameras, and so there is a lot more photos available, and so the demand, or so for the value of an image that we take goes down because there's so many other areas that they can purchase photos from or take photos from. So, and with social media, that's a number one area where people just take the photos and rebroadcast them or re reuse them without permission, pretty much. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's a tough time now because of social media and with the technology getting better, that anyone can have a camera to provide photos. And that, there's a lot of photographers out there that I hate to say it, that have will provide photos for free to get access, and that hurts the industry.
Sure, sure. So, overall, would you say that, as a creator of images, a very experienced person like yourself, has social media helped to promote photography or move it forward? Or in some ways, has it, kind of hurt overall the people who are making images, for a career?
I think it's both.
Okay.
It's helped in the sense that your images get out further, and get used a lot more. And then you also have to provide those photos quicker to the for social media purposes,
Mhm.
because they want to see those right away after the play happens or the moment happens. But yeah, that I feel like it's the value of it has gone down because there's so much access to social media. You're before you're waiting for the newspaper to print that photo out for you and see it in print, or in Sports Illustrated. So yeah, I feel like it's hurt the industry a little bit, but also given us as photographers more publicity.
I just remember as a kid, like literally 8 or 9 years old, my grandfather got a subscription for me to Sports Illustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a weekly magazine. And I mean, I just waited for that magazine to come into the mailbox because the thought of all these games going on, in the US and all over the world. And then, there's actually people there capturing these images, freezing those moments in time. I mean, I can just remember I was blown away by the pictures. And for me also, when I discovered photography was collecting baseball cards as a kid. When did your awareness of photography really kick in for you early on, even before you started actively shooting?
Oh yeah, it's the same with you. Collecting the Sports Illustrated magazines, looking at all the sports books because I was just a big fan of sports. But then I was more interested in seeing those images than reading about it. So those images were very popping, and I was very looking forward to seeing all those magazines be delivered to my house and have inspiration for that. And I got very fortunate later on to have a cover with Sports Illustrated and to have images in there, and those were just amazing moments.
So you bring up a good thing. So I remember hearing Jimmy Colton talk, who used to be I guess the photo editor for Sports Illustrated, and he gave a talk, and I had this dream to one day have a picture in Sports Illustrated because, like we said, we waited almost by the mailbox, and I got a report, like a royalty report, that showed that I had a picture in Sports Illustrated. So of course I immediately ran out and found it, and it was incredible. And then I was fortunate to have, I don't know, maybe six, I want to say 5 or 6 double trucks in SI, a double page spread for people who are not familiar with that term. And I just remember looking at that first one. Somebody said to me, you have a double truck in SI. I said, what are you talking about? And, of course I ran out and, opened the cover and the next page and the next page, and there it was. And, I think I heard angels sing, and harps play, so for you who had a cover and everything else, I mean, what was that feeling you had when this magazine that you loved as a kid, and now you as an adult had the cover? I mean, what was that even like?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, I felt I didn't look at my royalty check, but I felt like I probably paid more on how many issues I bought because my number one present that I gave to everyone that for Christmas that year was that cover because I was just so ecstatic to get that. And I don't remember if there was a photographer there for Sports Illustrated, but it was just a happy moment to capture. I mean, I was just ecstatic by that. It just to be a part of that magazine was so special.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to even explain. And as I've interviewed people, like Brad Mangian and others who have had half a dozen covers or 8 covers or whatever it is. I mean, that was kind of like the holy grail of sports photography. I mean, I don't think that's an overstatement, just given the Walter Yoses of the world and Neil Leifer and on, these people, Heinz Kludemeyer, just it's kind of like the pinnacle. And unfortunately we kind of, I don't know that in present day that we kind of have that iconic place where we could kind of point to like we did during that era. I think there's been a change. I mean, I mean, you could have 100 pictures a day all over the world, but I think we'd all agree we'd trade that for an SI cover or a double
Yes.
truck or
Yes.
whatever. I mean, is that fair to say?
Yes, that's very fair to say. I agree with that. I miss those moments of looking through that to see if I have an image in Sports Illustrated. So yeah, I really do miss those moments.
You shoot among other things golf, you shoot baseball. I've had people say to me in my case talking about baseball, they say, but it's so boring, it's so boring. And we're there making still images. And so the game is at the pace that it's at. It's definitely sped up in the last couple of years, especially as they've instituted a pitch clock and some of these other rules. But for people who look at some sports, unlike football, unlike basketball, unlike lacrosse, where those are some version of constant motion, how would you kind of describe what you look to capture in a sport like golf or baseball? Just use those, where some would say, gosh, that's so slow. But you're looking at moments that reliably generate a sense of action. I call this the vacation shot. So in golf, when a golfer is hitting a ball out of a sand trap, if I'm on the opposite side and they're facing me and they hit the ball, you get the ball in the shot, you get the sand going. That's like, you're shooting a picture of someone at a resort, because I call that, that's the resort golf shot. It's always a great shot. I mean, it is a great shot, but what are those moments in baseball and golf where, like, yeah, this conveys the action of these sports, which could otherwise be considered slower?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love about golf, because I photograph a lot of golf tournaments, and I do get that question, why are you covering all these? And I just love the challenge of photographing golf, because you got to work with the elements, and it makes me look outside the box and look at the big picture of what's there that I can utilize to make the image great. Like whether there's clouds or there's a you utilize the sun for a star filter kind of effect, shooting at f22, or any of the atmosphere, trees and whatnot. That's what I love about golf, is being able to challenge my brain into finding other things besides those vacation shots of bunkers and whatnot with that. So yeah, that's what I really do love about golf.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to shoot a number of senior PGA events, and those are fun, especially on the practice rounds, because I just remember was it Miguel Jimenez, and he hits a shot, and it's a good shot. He's there with his caddy. The caddy's making notes, and then he lights up a big cigar right
Yeah.
there, right there on the fairway, and he's just walking down the fairway before he hits the next shot. And naturally you don't see that during the from Thursday on or whatever, but during the practice rounds, the guys are just trying to dial in distances and get a feel. And for me, those days out there on the course are really about humanizing the athlete, shooting the personality of the athlete. Whether it's John Daly, who, you need a wide angle just to get all that personality, or, Freddie Couples or whatever. And, that I think really humanizes, the athlete in a way. And, for baseball, I spend a decent amount of time, in between innings, looking at the fans, looking at the interactions in the dugout. Is that something that when the in between innings, that you're kind of scanning, looking for opportunities, or in those times are you focusing on other things, getting ready for the next half inning to start?
It's a mixture of both. I mean, you want I like to do a storytelling of the game, so getting those moments of spectators in the crowd having fun, enjoying it, or making funny faces or stuff like that. And then, there's the concession stand people and whatnot, and then making a beautiful venue image. But then between innings too, you're also editing those photos to send out for deadline. So it's a mixture of both.
So whether it's, going back into history or present day, who are some of the photographers that either you look up to, or you just really enjoy their work? Who would you say those people are that listeners may want to check out in addition to your own work?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, in the Bay Area, there's Ezra Shaw for Getty Images. I love looking at his work. Jed Jacobson. There's Brad Mannion. There's Michael Zagaris. When I started off early, I looked at all the websites to see what kind of photos there are out there, and checking out gettyimages.com or imagine.com, and just yeah, there's a lot of great photographers out there. But yeah, I was very fortunate to work with David Gonzalez, who's a wonderful photographer, and Michael Zagaris. Just even all the stories that he tells at the games, it's a lot of fun to be around him. He has a lot of amazing stories.
Yeah, he and I have like a text chain that pretty much every day we're we're sharing a story, or we're sharing a meme, or whatever. And I told him he's like the Forrest Gump of photography, because he's been in all these places where you just shake your head and you kind of can't even believe it. It's just super super interesting for sure. So, people have talked about the potential for video to kind of take over for stills, where people will shoot video and then they'll just pull screenshots from that. Why do you think that won't happen, or why do you think it will happen?
Could happen either way on it.
Mm-hmm.
There's the technology is getting so much better with all the cameras, and being able to do that. But I think there is still a love for photography, that you capture those one moments, those singular moments, versus just grabbing out of a video screen grab.
It's an unanswerable question, which of course that's why I asked it, is an unanswerable question. So, one of the things that I think that, as you and I are at various events, and I know I'm seeing more and more social media folks that teams are hiring, so that they can have really instant, from field to social media kind of coverage, videos, et cetera. And the one thing that I think is a real differentiator for photographers, let's assume we all have similar quality gear, et cetera, but I think it's the knowledge of the sport. I think understanding the sport, understanding tendencies, and understanding how to anticipate moments and be there before the moment. You shoot so many different types of sports. What do you attribute your ability to have not just a working knowledge, but a solid knowledge of so many different events? Because it's a lot of different sports with different attributes.
I do a lot of study work. There's at the Olympics, there are a lot of events that I don't cover on a normal basis. So I will YouTube it. I will read up about the rules and regulations of it, just to know. But it's a lot of anticipation in sports. You gotta think about it beforehand, and think that what could happen or what could not happen.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
There's just a lot to it. So let me ask you, when you are not at work, do you do a lot of photography? Or when you're not shooting, is a camera the last accessory that you want to have on your body?
Yeah, I've done a lot more with just the iPhone. But I will bring out a camera here on vacations, because I just can't put a camera down at a lot of times, because I wish I had a camera at those moments. But for everyday life, I just use my iPhone. For vacations, I'll bring my Leica Q2 just to have, because I feel those photos come out a lot better than the iPhone at times.
Isn't it freeing to have, you're using a Leica Q2, isn't it? And whether it's that, or it's a Fuji, or it's whatever it is, like, how great is it to be using the eye that you have developed over the years, using that eye, but literally with one camera, and it's super lightweight, and you can run around with it without cameras and lenses clanging against your hip and your leg and all that, and a monopod. And it's like you can enjoy what you love doing, but you're sort of free to do it in a much more relaxed, more comfortable way.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's a lot more fun in that sense because if you don't capture that moment, it's okay. But I like the challenge of having that one camera and trying to figure out what I can get out of it, versus being able to have all the cameras for a sporting event. So yeah, I do enjoy shooting still on my off time. It gives me challenges, and it also helps me work on my craft for when I do shoot sporting events, because I'll utilize those elements that I thought of on vacation and put those to work in my normal day-to-day life.
Well, as a photographer, your child, your recently born child, is going to have a heck of a lot of pictures, huh?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's too many now.
So now, is your wife someone who enjoys photography, or does she say, "Hey, Kyle, that would be a great picture if you want to take it," or is she also with her own camera doing that?
Oh, she's also doing that too as well. So yeah, we have too many moments of him that he will have a lot of embarrassing moments to show later on.
Well, I can tell you that I have three kids, and when they were young and involved in theater and sports and all that stuff, I was the embarrassing dad with the 300 photographing their little league game and their ice hockey game. But as embarrassing as it was then to them, they loved it when dad would print out 4x6s for all the kids on the team. Then it wasn't so embarrassing. And, since we now have, mirrorless, which really doesn't make a sound, it doesn't sound like, a rapid fire, from the parents section. So, I'm sure that your kids will enjoy the benefit of having a professional photographer for a dad.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that will happen for sure.
Well, I know that people are going to want to follow your work and see what you have going on. What are the best places for people to access what you do and see examples of your work?
Probably imagine.com is where a lot of my day normal photos are. But then there's Instagram, which is at Terada Photo. And then also my website, teradaphoto.com.
That's great. That's great. Well, and I know that people will check that out. And I'll probably get messages through Instagram with, questions about, who knows, what lenses exactly does Kyle use and all those kind of things. Well, Kyle, I want to thank you for your generosity of time and for being on the program and sharing so much. I really, really appreciate you doing that.
Well, I appreciate it. It's an honor. Thank you very much.
And I want to just let all of the listeners know that they can check out what I have going on. Instagram is usually the best. Mitch Stringer Images is the best way to do that. You can also take a look online at mitchstringerimages.com. I suggest, if you have any questions, just shoot me a DM. I'm pretty good about getting back. I know in the last week or so, I've had a lot of questions about people planning wildlife travel and, where should I go? And this is my budget. And, should I do this? And what should I bring? And, I'm happy to answer those. I get back to people pretty quickly. And so, I welcome that. I also suggest go ahead and like and review the show. That helps get the word out and let everybody know what we're doing and hear from people like Kyle and the many others who've been so gracious to join us. So until next time, I wish everybody great light. I wish you great shooting, and we'll talk again soon.